Hello, gang. I'm Joe Cox, the pop marketer, and on this episode of the Pop Marketing Podcast, I get the pleasure of talking with Meagan Dexter, a senior strategist of brand partnerships at Complex Networks. Complex began as that fringe lifestyle publication in 2002, focusing on hip hop, sneakers, and comics. Brought to us by the grandfather of streetwear himself, Mark Ecko. But over the last 20 years of growing, Complex has evolved to become the Complex Networks and has found the balance between the energy of subculture and the scale of popular culture. The magazine has been now replaced by a network of shows like Hot Ones, First We Feast, Sneaker Stories, a range of content from streetwear, food, music, sneakers, and sports. It's a ton of sub-brands. They even throw a yearly rager of an event called Complex Con. I'll have to go there someday. Part of Complex's success has been due to their approach to branded content. They take a very hands-on approach to make sure that brand partnerships integrate seamlessly within Complex content. It gives brands the opportunity to participate rather than merely just advertise in between things. The pop marketing approach to branded content isn't only best in class, it's in a class of its own. And lucky for us, we have Meagan here to talk about how she got to her dream gig at Complex and how her particular background and skill set, cocktail of strategy, research, trend forecasting, and creative development, has helped shepherd brands into the complex world of popular culture to think up and activate ideas that impact. So Meagan is brilliant. I'm psyched to learn more about Complex's branded content approach. And without any further ado, let's talk to Meagan Dexter with Complex. Well, let's go. Hey, everybody, this is Joe, and you are listening to the Pop Marketing Podcast. And today, they're all special guests, very special guests, but I'm so pumped and geeked to be able to bring on Meagan Dexter for everybody to kind of learn a little bit about. Meagan, how are you doing?
I'm doing so well. It's great to see you. Old friends, new conversation.
It's so cool, and it's so good to be able to have an excuse to catch up. But I think I hit you up, I don't know, sometime at the end quarter of last year, and I was just throwing it out there. But I see that, your career ever since we worked together way back in the day has been super interesting. And right now you are actually a senior strategist for brand partnerships at the Complex Networks.
Yes, 100% nailed it. All the words.
Yes, and network specifically, which I kind of wanted to get into because the Complex, I'll give a little tiny bit. What I knew is we're talking 2002 Complex, Mark Ecko, that's that skateboarding, comic books, fashion. Yeah. And then, dude, that's next year, that's 20 years, right? Where does it go? I remember getting Ecko clothes that was, to me as a kid in the middle of the Midwest, was as cool as I could get, right? The closest to street culture I could get was some.
Yeah. And you know what's cool about Complex today too is I think we've really grown in a way where the kid from the small town in the Midwest, we still might be one of the first places or one of the places they know to go and keep up with kind of the things that aren't maybe mainstream pop culture. So if they're a kid that loves hip hop like I was, or, they love these sneakers and there's not a huge community of people around them that appreciate those too. I know for me, being from Kansas where we met, I have cousins, small, teenage cousins from small towns in Kansas. And I remember going home one Christmas and I told them I worked for Complex, and his eyes lit up. He was like, "Oh my God, you work for Complex." And I was like, "Whoa, this is really crazy. This whole thing is actually kind of touching these places that aren't considered hotspots for these things." So
it was so hard back in the day to get culture, right? To connect with it. It used to be, I always say, it's it went from the coasts in, and by the time it got to me, I would be wearing hammer pants 10 years too late, right? Midwest was always the last to get it. But the internet, allowed us to kind of find each other, right? And kind of get that part of our identity faster. I wish I would have had it, you know?
Yeah, the internet is so funny because I always kind of trip up over this, but I feel like you kind of have one door in, sort of. For most of us, it's like we find a majority of the things we find through Google. Maybe that's just me. I don't know, but I always am curious to try to like break out of how I know to get into the internet and how you like get into these new places and find these new things, especially like locally. I don't know, this is maybe way off topic from where we're headed, but I just think, even using search nowadays to just try to like learn your neighborhood better. I just made a huge move to LA, like trying to find these local pockets of culture and creative. I think the internet is still it's probably the best place, but it's still a really tough place to get into. I don't know. I feel like I'm a Googler by trade almost with being a strategist, but I still like have a lot to learn, I feel like, in terms of how to utilize it all better. Like
And navigate the just breadth of it. Like, I'm with you. Like Google gets me started on my journey on a lot of weird, rabbit holes you go down. But dude, whenever you get into a good niche, you're onto something when Google is not providing. I'm like, I can't find it. Like, I cannot find this thing. So where else do I go? Reddit. Let's go. Try
right.
Reddit.
You have to like learn how to use all these different search portals and all these things. Yeah, man. I feel like my preferred method of searching is Spotify. I feel like I've gotten this like really good rhythm down for finding new music or new artists and like the people I check out and like spy on kind of. And if I could just apply that to like all other aspects of life, it'll be good.
I mean, that's what UX is supposed to get us someday. Like, it'll just be one giant Spotify search. I love that. I mean, Complex has gone from 2002 to something completely different. 2016, I think they sold to Verizon, but it's like Hot Ones. People know it. Your parents would know it. Like, it's the place where you eat the chicken wings and that it gets progressively spicier. And they're interviewing like huge people, celebrity and culture. You have, everything from Complex Con to I'm looking at all the shows. It's like Pigeon and Planes for the music folks. First We Feast and Food. The Shop I had never seen, and I'm like, shit. I shouldn't have clicked on this. So it's huge. It's a giant network. And I don't know if everybody realizes the kind of growth that's happened and the breadth and why would they call it complex networks, but it's big.
It's big. And I think even as a consumer of the brand, I learned how big it was when I got on the inside. So it's super interesting. The networks piece is, I think, a vital pivot the company's made over the last 18 years, really trying to figure out how to keep growing. I mean, when we talk about our competitors and like who we want to be like, we're talking about the Disneys and the Nikes of the world. We're not looking around at typically other publishers or even other TV channels that have done it before. So I think we're really trying to keep a broad mindset for how to keep up with all of the different platforms that come out that this young consumer wants to move on to. I think our calling card is really this idea of hitting what's next. And being what's next requires a lot of, keeping up with the culture, the people that really make the culture, the topics of conversation that, emerge from other topics of conversation. I think it's just the genre-lessness and the crossover of things like music, pop culture, food, sneakers, fashion really at large. I think their gaming now is a piece of all of that. We really just try to kind of connect the dots and be in the center of sort of all of those pieces and what makes them interesting.
Yeah, and so it's kind of a no-brainer of like why pop marketing and pop culture, because a lot of Complex really showed me a lot of the ways of which it's like in that soup. Mm-hmm. You can, in that soup of what's going on right now, which is constantly growing and shifting, you can start to play the stock market game of like what has legs or what has energy and when it will kind of get pulled from subculture or pop culture to like mainstream, right? And like that back and forth mechanism. And that's a ton of the energy that I push to use in pop marketing, right? Is like, hey, take advantage of that energy while it's of what's on that edge, and then utilizing it. And then we pull it into mainstream where it dies and gets eaten by mainstream. And that's fine. That's part of the journey. It's part of the journey.
You have to keep changing it. Yeah, you gotta keep it fresh. I mean, that's what I think is so cool about Complex, right? Is that content is really just a small piece of the pie. Yes, it is a huge part of what we do, of course, and a lot of our thinking stems from kind of how can we capture this in a really cool story. But we also have this super cool shop e-com platform that we've opened over the last year that's like curating some of the most high like luxury brands next to just some of the cool classic brands that like you probably keep in your closet for life, you know, the dope Converses of the world and the Vans, you know, things that make a signature style, if you will. We have Complex Con, like Complex Land. Complex Con truly blew my mind the first time I went. I think you know, I always probably keep a little bit too much of, you know, I always have like the skeptic in the back of my mind. And I think hearing about Complex Con, I was like, what is this going to be? You know, like the mall for hype beasts? What will this really look like? And when you get inside there, the like palpable energy and just like truly passion of these young people who want to just get to know other people that care about the same shit they care about. And that goes everywhere from like social causes to being the next big designer in the streetwear world, you know, whatever they came to talk about, just being an artist. It's like a place where I think, you know, you don't have a bunch of adults running around that don't get it, telling you like, what do you mean? Or how does that work? And you can just kind of
it's like a group that really needed something, and I think Complex Con was a good example, and Complex in general, of filling gaps that just weren't there, of like community that just didn't exist, and then finding how like deep the well runs, right? Like how much, because it kind of is familiar to like a South by, but not at all. And then like a Comic Con,
yes,
like the pop culture con, you know, con type of thing. And then a music festival, like everything kind of wrapped in together, but not necessarily anything that I would say there's anything that could, well, it's just like this.
one-on-one. I hope it like always feels that way too, because I think that is, you're right. The community needed something like that. And I think 2020, I mean, really the last 5 years, 4 years in general has given such an interesting opportunity to Complex also, because, you know, Complex Con is inherently a meeting of the minds of all of these people that share the same interests and passions around kind of all of these things. But, you know, there's like a huge part of the conversation that has become more serious and more like pressing from even a political news standpoint, the kind of the same way you're talking about filling in the gaps in like style at one point, like we were. I think one of the things I'm most proud of and how we've evolved over the last year is we've really put a stake in the ground for even trying to fill the white space of like investigative journalism and the like the mainstream media, if you will. Like what are the perspectives they're not writing from or sharing the story from when, you know, it comes to Black and brown voices, when it comes to even just like the types of conversations that interest young people in the election. You know, we've really, I think, made a super important investment into being a well-known, go-to, well-researched place to like host those conversations also. And I feel like that is a huge opportunity to become even bigger in so many ways, is, you know, to take that space up. And
Somebody's got to do it. And it's like, and I think that's the other part of it too, is it's pop. I think people would be, the cultures that come out of this and the communities that come out of this, it's not just because it's in the pop culture world doesn't mean that I mean, these communities know how to believe in something, have a purpose, and then fight for that thing, you know, to get a voice. So Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of examples of that. Places where you wouldn't think that this kind of news and voice would come from. Something that a lot of people would think is surface level, and then showing kind of the depths of those things. I did want to get into this. I wanted to set the line for everybody of like talk about your job at Complex real quick, and then I wanted to get into like your like how the hell do you get there, right? Like
Okay.
what is that thing you do? And it's not like explaining to a parent, but like what do you do for Complex? And we'll start there.
Okay, I love this question. It's by far it's a completely different strategy job than I've ever had in the past. So I'm a senior strategist on the brand partnerships team at Complex. What does that mean? So the strategy team at Complex functions in a super interesting way. I would say we are really a hybrid between maybe your typical strategist where you're doing, the consumer truths, the insights, the like really finding the best way to win the business from brand partners who want to come in and work with Complex. But we're also really the creative development team. So the job is super interesting, and because the ideas I come up with on the daily to match these brands into kind of our world and with our consumer are like ideas that launch and actually happen from my head. So we kind of assume like all of the pre-sale creative direction. And don't get me wrong, we work with a number of teams, like brilliant minds pouring into all this work, but we're sort of the shepherd of really like getting the ball over the net, if you will, which is awesome. So, I mean, there's like a million things in the world that I like had such a hand in over the last 3 years, which is really cool because, I mean, we'll get into it, but I think strategy as a whole, sometimes you do a lot of work that sort of like you like tangibly, you never really know how it lands into the world, or you can't like point at it and say, oh, that piece was me. So it's really interesting. I think it's a completely different type of work in some ways.
Yeah, you're unbounded. And for people that aren't familiar, like in the advertising world, there's just a structure of how things work, just because that's how it happens. When you do something for 50 years, like it becomes becomes a structure, and there's kind of this is your place as a strategist, and you come up, you can get the research and insight, and then it's cute that you have ideas, but that again goes over to another place where they're kind of in charge of that. So
Down the line, yeah.
and you move it down the line into then it's production, and then the thing goes off in the world, and you've completely forgotten what that thing was. And you're on to 4 other things. And you might have your name on the can listing, right? Like, and be like, oh yeah, I did write that brief.
Yeah. We work like hand in hand with the production teams, which is super awesome. Like the amount I've learned about being on set, or, how to give good feedback to an editor, those types of things, being in that room has been eye-opening. I mean, the way shit gets made is wild. I mean, people are so talented. Putting these things together is just mind-blowing.
So to really break it down, a brand would come to Complex and say, hey, you have your audience is somebody we'd really like to get in front of, right? Because I mean, if you look at kind of the audience, I mean, there's nobody that really beats you in the male. I think 14 to 44, and then women. It's like number 3. It's massive, right? And there's a lot of different places to play. So a brand's like, hey, I want to play in your world, in your networks, but I don't know how to do that. Here's a commercial. Like, do you just run commercials on there, right? Like, how does that work when a brand comes to you?
Yeah, this is a great question. You were making me get to the point. Thank goodness. Okay, so that's exactly how it works. So a brand comes to us and they say, hey, we're launching this new product. We want people to know who we are, et cetera. All the classic advertising challenges. How can we do it through your audience? So we have like a number of ways you can work with us. I mean, yes, you can give us your commercial and we can run media all over our giant network of websites. Great way to work together. Definitely one small piece of it. My job when it gets really exciting is to create like custom content series or integrations into our original content. All of the shows that we have on YouTube, et cetera, figure out how they can kind of integrate authentically or, pop up during the conversation, really borrow those audiences for what they're trying to do. I've had the privilege of working on a lot of more 360 campaigns lately, and that's really when you get to take advantage of everything from, yes, let's do content together. Let's launch something really awesome. But we also want to drop an exclusive collaboration of our product at ComplexCon. We want to show up at Complex Land now, which is online and be all over the globe. We also, want to do a bunch of social. How can we time that out over the whole year? So in a lot of ways, it can look like a big agency pitch and comm strategy and placing all of these things. But I think the hook is you always have to figure out how complex, why only Complex could be doing with this partner. And also, why could only this partner be doing it with Complex? So all at the service of the consumer, of course, because at the end of the day, I work for the people who watch and read Complex, so it's a really interesting equation. It looks different every single day. So if I failed to explain any of it, please let me know. But I think a great way to go really use our distribution and really be able to show up inside of the conversation, I think, rather than just surround it.
Right. Or in between it, right? In those little spots in between or whatever it is. It's really to say, hey, we can work you, we can help. I would think you're more of a shepherd of, hey, here is all the stuff that we can do. I know it really well, and that's my job, but you don't. And let's talk about all the awesome ways we can kind of incorporate it through all those different. What could it really look like apart from just making one thing, right? How are the connection points? What is going to really resonate with the Complex audience? That is the stuff where I feel like the future of all of this is, it's not just going on broadcast, or it's not just going into these mass places. And you really got to understand the language of not only social channels, but different communities and different places on the interwebs.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a shepherd or somebody that's okay, this is how we bring you into this in a way where it doesn't feel weird, that is what, you're kind of that in between for somebody.
I hope so. I think that's definitely a huge piece of it. I mean, most of us have everything we need for so I think it's a lot of times trying to just create an environment or create a situation where you can put a product inside of it so someone watching can actually see and feel how they might incorporate this thing into their life, it's the most basic of it all, which is challenging, but I think really fun when you think about, you really have to cut the bullshit meter off every day. You really have to look at this stuff through your own eyes and be would I enjoy this? Would I watch this? Because, if I pitch it and it happens and it's this is invading my life. These are the things I pay attention to and enjoy every day. So, I don't want to harsh my own vibe, let alone, the 73 million people that come to Complex, so it's a lot of fun to think about. I personally just really love new things and seeing what new stuff is coming into the world. The term the kids, but really the kids and they're building the future. And I love to just kind of try to bring as much fresh, what if we did this to the table every day, because, there's definitely a formula for what has worked. And if by God, if you need it, we got it. And I think, also trying to figure out what's next, what are we going to do next, and build from there.
Yeah. It's a great course in, not just helping brands through Complex, but helping brands understand, how to be a part of a culture or to add to a culture instead of seeing it as bags of money and numbers that you just can the consumer, the
100%.
audience of non-human, and to say, okay, well, how do I add, if I want to jump into this world, what are you going to add? And I love when you said, because it's exactly what it is for key partnerships is, how do you make it that's not something that only these two brands can do? It's only something that Complex and X can do together. So it's not like, hey, here's our list of different like sponsorships,
Yeah.
and you just pay us money and we'll get your logo and we'll put it up here, and you have like a baseball stadium or something like that. It's what is something that you can really put those two things together that only you could do there. I love that, and that shines through. And then, like, what does each person provide, right? Like, it's not a sponsorship where the brand just puts up money. It's like, what do you put into the relationship, and then what is Complex helping give you that distribution or access to?
Make it pop, if you will.
Make it pop. Hey, do they still use making culture pop as like a tag?
I haven't seen it around in a while. I really like it, so I'm going to keep it alive. But it's good. It's really good.
I think that gave me like the idea for Pop Marketer. I was in New York and I went to the office and I saw that and I was like, I want that. It was like a neon sign. I was like, I need that. That is it.
That is it.
That is a good little tag. It was just flip it. It's like, that's too easy. All right, so that's the job, future casting inside these world of trends and what's going on with the kids. I love that term. It's awesome, right? Like you're finding these different connection points and different ideas, and constantly in that kind of the energy of pop culture, the zeitgeist, the new, the fresh, right? How the hell does somebody get to that as a job, right? Like what's your story?
Great question. Well, it all starts with a young Meagan Dexter who loved Walk a Flock of Flame. So first, like, have something you love. I love rap, like, as long as I can remember. I'm sure to my mother's deep dismay. Shout out Janine. So how did I get to Complex? Great question. Well, I guess it starts with how we met. I was a very confused generalist, like lost in the world of like, I love everything. I'm super interested in everything. How am I ever going to find like the job I want to do? I was studying economics fresh out of the engineering program at University of Wisconsin. So I was like, okay, it sounds to me like in economics, your options are working for the government, which did not appeal to me. Shout out the government, sure. And okay, that's not it. So pretty much that was like year one route directly through econ. And I remember I was studying abroad in Rome, like happened to hear about Barkley, which is an ad agency in Kansas City. I don't know. Honestly, where I'm going with this is that I applied to the strategy program. I think just like out of the blue, the description sounded funny. I had no idea what it was. And I think the stars aligned. I'd never worked in marketing, and Tim Gallus, chief strategy officer at Barkley, probably the most brilliant mind I've ever had the pleasure of meeting with. I don't know, the stars aligned, and I ended up basically falling into strategy at Barkley and learned there that, strategy was just kind of like the combination of art and business, like being creative and understanding business. And I was like, okay, bingo, I think I can run with this. This makes a lot of sense to me. I think I'm creative and I have this desire to like be in the room. I want to do the numbers, etc. And from there, I like really just picked a place. I had like my sights set on Drogify. I was like, I really think it's the best place in the world, so I probably should be there. That's where I need to go to. So I started tweeting people or like researching. I researched the hell out of all the people there to find someone who I could connect with, and like by the grace of God found this awesome strategist there who was also apparently into rap. It was like in her bio, and I hit her up on Twitter. I was like, I'm coming to New York, XYZ dates, like, please have coffee with me. When she said yes, I booked my flight to New York for those dates. And that was kind of the beginning of it. So I fell into basically what became brand strategy. And really, I think the biggest takeaway from that is like when you're a junior strategist, you don't, I mean, yes, you bring things to the table, of course, but like one of the best things I feel like you can really do is just be eyes and ears and be really hungry to like help bring information back to the room that other people can like play with. So
Yep.
that was kind of what I did. I got to New York and I was like, let me loose, baby. Like, I'm going to go find and meet as many people as I can. So that really brought me into kind of what became the second phase of my career, which was trend spotting, like trend forecasting. If you can believe it, that's a real job. I like had the title of being a futurist, which felt wild. No one understood it. But the premise of the job was essentially like, can you pay attention to these little tiny signals in the noise now and try to extrapolate them into like credible business opportunities down the line for Fortune 500s? So I was working at this like kind of crazy think tank called Brain Reserve. We were putting together these strategies that, I mean, I still to this day haven't been asked to come into a room and like present for the year 2050. But that was kind of what we were doing there. It was like, okay, picture this, the world ends and consumers need like XYZ. You should go into like, you know, back in the 70s, it was like bottled water. Now it'd be like, you should really get into the bunker business. I don't know, you know, so things like that. That was really cool. It was amazing. I think it taught me a lot about just business. You know, we were working with like executives and things like that. So just trying to understand like when you're in the room with someone, you know, what are they really like, what are their motivations? Because it's like going to make them look really good at their job. And so like, how can you help them get there? Oh man, I'm getting lost in my own story here. So where are we? We're at Brain Reserve, fell into this like amazing incubator and design and brand strategy after that, where we were like launching brands from the ground up. And what was so dope about that is it was global insights, but like in the truest of ways. At Safari Sundays, we would like do these immersions. So I got to go to Sao Paulo, like I got to kind of travel and basically bring back insights from across the world to inform innovation teams.
Cool. I do love this idea of you walking into, and a group of people like you walking into rooms with the execs at a Coca-Cola or something, right? Like, and for them to be like, we're going to pay you lots of money and you just tell us what you're in, like what's going on, because we have no idea.
It was wild. I had dinner next to some like wildly brilliant thinkers who to this day I'm like, whoa, I can't believe like we ate pasta together, which was amazing. Like, I think I just fell in love with like presenting and being in front of clients and like really enjoying learning from them about what they see when they look at their business, you know. But you're wondering how I got to Complex, so I guess I should wrap this all up. Essentially, again, it really comes back to I was a huge fan of Complex. I was a huge fan of being in the zeitgeist of culture and all of these things. So I kind of weaseled my way into just meeting some people and making connections there. And they eventually came to me and were like, we have an opportunity. Like, do you want to be a part of it? And I kind of just jumped right in. Hell yeah. So ever since then, I think it's been a totally different piece of my brain from all of the other types of strategy I've done. But I think it's been really fun to kind of bring some of the like formal aspects of trend spotting, if you will, into the job here. Because like naturally it happens, but I think it like takes a little bit of a burden off of people's plates sometimes if you can tell them what's going on in the world of culture, news, and all of these things without them having to dig around and find it themselves. So I try to make it easier, hopefully, on my colleagues.
So that, I mean, it always comes down to this, and I always tell people, like, whenever I talk in front of people or whatever, it's like, just hit me up, Twitter, like LinkedIn, or like do it. Like, you wouldn't believe how you can get in contact with it's just not that hard. It just takes, but there's a lot of, it almost helps if the younger you are and like the more like you're like, who cares? Like, this is what I'm going to do. Because the more you're thinking about it, you're going to over scare yourself out of it. And it's like anything is possible. I did, and this isn't a positive affirmation show,
It could
but
be.
I think it could be. I need it, but it's like one of those things where it's like, hey, are you hungry? What do you want? Kind of got to know what, in order to help manifest it. What do you want? No matter what the reasons are, what are you gunning for? And then, just keep tweeting somebody until you get somebody to, on the line and asking questions and figuring out, I love that Droga story.
That Droga story is, I mean, bless her heart for like taking my call. Katie Alonso, if you're out there, seriously, like a genius human being. I'm so grateful for her. But I think, the brazen confidence I had when use your youth, right? Like, say I am young. I want to be. Can you help me? Like, do you have 5 minutes? I mean, nowadays it's even harder to write that note because I'm like, I start typing it out. I'm like, I am a young, and I'm like, oh God, they're gonna look and like I'm not that young. I guess I have to like delete that. I need a little expertise under my belt at this point. And yeah, man, I mean, people really are down to help if you know what if they know how to help you. So that was like the best piece of advice I got really early was like, even if you don't know what you want, for the purpose of the conversation you're trying to have, act like you do. And like, 100%. Put it forward and like let them know how they can help you. And most people want to do a good deed. Most people like want to help.
Yeah, totally. And then you just built through time and trying out some other stuff and being in a place like New York of like getting used to all that and then building your confidence up to a point where it's like, okay, I'm ready for a complex because like I get it. Like I'm actually there now where I'm like, cool. I get the methodology a little bit more of what's going on, and you can just articulate like, okay, yeah, this is what future casting means, and this is how it works.
Yeah. Have like having a method that works for you, having kind of a template in your own head for how you get to your best ideas. And then, overlaying that with the process you get of wherever you go, the tools they use, the stakeholders you need to hit, the teams you need to like ask for their input on, get a lay of the land there, and then relationship manage until like these two things fuse together really well, because, you need like people in your court to move really quickly, and you need people who want to like work with you. Have to build trust with people to like be able to work as fast as we work at Complex. You have to have a team where if you throw out an idea and it's half baked, but you need to get something out the door, like you need to have these things in place where they know it's going to all turn out okay. When you finish baking it, when you get all the I's dotted, is that the saying? Yeah, I's dotted, it's going to be beautiful. And I think that has been one of the coolest parts of working with all the different people I've worked with is like, you figure out how to really make whole stories really quickly, which is awesome.
Right. And it takes, you can read 100 books, you can study it all you want, but I have not found anything anywhere close to just doing it right over and over again, painfully getting there, that just all of a sudden a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, you're just like, oh, okay, well, I have a new level of, I'm just better, right? Like, cause you just keep on cranking it, and content's a really cool place for that to happen, cause the speed of which culture works and Complex has to work. You get a lot of reps, I assume, on ideas.
It's cool. I think fruition. Maybe just kind of coming into the phase of my life I'm coming into, like actually knowing when something's kind of clicked. And I feel like, being kind of having nurtured my role at Complex and like really being here and like continuing to practice and doing these things differently, having to solve new challenges, but bring it home to like a similar output and like continuing to rep that, you're so right. It is like, okay, I think I've reached kind of a new like phase of this, which is cool. You just kind of feel it. I mean, it was like when I learned how to ride the subway in New York, it was like sometime between year 3 and year 4, I was like, oh shit, I get this. Like, this is really, I'm like not thinking about it anymore. And, you know, that's kind of nice. It feels good.
Yeah, people tend to think it's kind of this thing that just kind of happens in your brain where you will know it. Like I plan it out and this is how it goes and this and now I've and it is more of a feeling, right? Like you can play more jazz all of a sudden because you're more, you know, the fundamentals a little more. Before you go, I wanted to ask this. So I I am obsessed with that idea of the better partnerships, right? And the better, like, I do believe that content, we'd make a lot of boring shit, and brands do, and they can't help themselves, and that's our job, is to help them get out of their own way on those things and kind of get out of that comfort zone that they need to be in. What are a couple examples of some stuff that you've done or been a part of, or even just seen at Complex where you're like, that's it. That's the one that would be the idea of a 360 that is like, man, they really utilized it well. And I feel like we made a piece of content that goes beyond just selling stuff.
Oh man, you know? I love that question. I have so many favorites and things I'm really happy the world got to see. I guess like 2 things that come to mind sort of over the past year. I really like one because it's such a duh, and I love that everyone knew right away that it was the right thing, and one that was a bit more of a like, what? But it worked. I just love it to this day. So
perfect.
Next Gen America is like this like progressive, really cool organization that rallied around the election. They're like whole thing was really making sure just young people got out to vote, and they came to Complex and they were, you know, they didn't know what they wanted to do, but they knew that this was like an important place to align with. And kind of back to what I was saying earlier about like making this investment in investigative journalism and all these things together with this partnership, we were actually able to like double the amount of episodes we were able to launch around election issues and very important things that were coming up in the 2020 polls, obviously. So what I loved about this was, one, I think it had a piece of a formula that always is really successful with working with Complex, is it used our IP. I think it had where it went where we had a proven audience. So they came in, they sponsored all these episodes, but outside of the episodes they sponsored, we created all these like really custom, awesome explainers that helped, I mean, just really easily put information in people's hands about what was coming up. We worked with all of our hosts at Complex to create like go vote videos and make sure people were getting out into the polls. So again, like pulling in faces that you can only find on Complex, like really getting our audience to stop when they're scrolling through their feeds because they recognize this person they listen to every day, talk about the news and things they love. So I think in terms of synergy, I really loved that partnership. It's just like I tell you, you're like, obviously, that's such an obvious connection. One of my favorites going way back, like a little bit further back, was we have a great telecom client, Simple Mobile. They're amazing. We work with them every year. They have always wanted to like align with, you know, different passion points of their audience. So this one particular year, we were really trying to figure out what to do differently. And we had this cool new show that was getting like, it was growing like Hot Ones was growing. And we were like, okay, we really need to make sure that this is like going to blossom and bloom. So Simple Mobile came in and we were like, what if this show called The Burger Show, which is all about, you know, burger culture, which you'd think, wait, what? But it's this awesome host, Alvin Kalin. He's a chef he started Egg Slut in LA, if anyone's familiar. And he's like a burger scholar. He like knows all this stuff about burgers, but the show essentially, he would just go across the country, meeting different people, exploring like subcultures of the burger community, eating dinner with like Seth Rogen, all of his chef friends, all of these people, and talking about it. And we put the two together. We created this like awesome ecosystem about like simple recipes. Alvin's whole thing was meat, cheese, bun is how a burger is made. So how simple is that? we created like a whole custom recipe series out of this idea of simplicity and like getting in the kitchen and putting it all together. They sponsored 3 seasons of the burger show, which was awesome. It ran a whole year, which was like amazing. We made merch. We did Complex Con together. We did 2 Complex Cons together, actually. Like, really what I loved about that is they were down to take a risk, in the sense that like it wasn't apples to apples. You know, they did trust us on how these things came together. But I think ultimately they really found a space that like no one else in the category was doing. And, you know, there's sports, there's music, there's all these things that, you know, seem like the A to B path for reaching this customer. But we said, you know, hey, there's a real synergy here in the like ethos of this show and this host and this person. We think it makes a lot of sense. Like, do you want to go on this journey with us, essentially? And they were down. It was so cool. We were in the room together, basically like figuring out the moments that they were integrated and figuring out how they wanted to show up. Like, it was definitely a 2-way conversation. And I think ultimately that program to me just really still stands out as like an oddball couple. Like there's like a saying about this. I don't know, but I love it. I still to this day love how it all came together and how big it felt too. I mean, just going the whole year and doing all of that was awesome.
Yeah, I find it all the time. It's like whenever you talk about pop culture or brands getting with partnership or getting into partnerships, it comes to that. It's easy to say, I want to be part of the thing that everybody loves. Like, yeah, I want a Mandalorian, like a Baby Yoda thing. Like, yeah, everybody, that's proven. There's no risk because everything has been built, but it's also exorbitantly expensive, right? To be in a Marvel movie or to do those things that are really pop culture but mainstream, that kind of that machine of that. But if you want to be a brand and you want a real opportunity, like, I love it because it's like, start something. Like, hey, we're starting something and we really believe in it and we're complex. And like, he's great. And this burger thing this is the right idea for you, but you're going to have to trust us because it's not the thing that I have like that the hot ones that everybody on the planet is watching. Right. But look at what you get if you're a brand of like, build something with somebody instead of, you know, it starts to cut itself off a bit more and get more expensive whenever it's something that's big. And for you and I, my favorite thing is to find that thing and you're like, I know this is going to be big. If you just come with us and help us make that big, it's going to get big. Like, this is the thing you need, but it does. It's a risk, right?
It takes time. And I'll definitely say this, like, it sounds like something your agency tells you because it's easier for them, but when we tell people all the time, like, go find the really cool on the cusp emerging talents and align with them. And it sounds like a play, right? It sounds like it's in the best interest of the person like making the content because it makes their life easier. But when I tell you that there is so much more like absorption and love from the audiences that follow these people to like see them working with a brand and see them like being like, it resonates just tenfold because it doesn't look like a check. It looks like a partnership. And these audiences like love this person and they love them early and they want to support them. So they look at that I feel this way. Like, those audiences look at these people, these talents and say like, oh yeah, hell yeah, he got the check. Like, hell yeah, he's in the part of this partnership. I love to see them getting the love they deserve. And that is like the clicks, the engagement, all those metrics you want to report back to your client and say you nailed. Like, that is, I really, truly believe, like, such an important ingredient of how you do it.
And real quick, because it's been an ongoing theme, and then we'll wrap up. But do you feel, what is the smarts of a consumer? Is it a meta consumer that understands how media works? You just said like they know that there's a check involved, like that it's not trying, there's no tricking. But it's almost, I feel like, and I've talked in like anime fandoms and different things, they very much understand how the business works, more so than ever before. And it's like, cool. Like the fact that I knew this person first and now they have a brand thing means that I get more stuff. Like
Yeah.
they're gonna be able to do more cool stuff. And I'm down.
Totally. I mean, like you were there first. You saw them before the brand saw them. Like it's almost like a psych play a little bit for your audience too, them feeling like they were there in the beginning. But I mean, oh no, don't tell me I'm going to forget your question literally mid-sentence. That's so embarrassing.
No, I do it all the time, but it's like the consumer is smart, right? Like I try to get brands in on this all the time, but I'm like, it's best to think that they know probably more about media than you do. Like they know how it works.
It's such a tough question because you can't really avoid it, right? You can't like say, okay, like be really upfront about it. I think there's a tone for every brand to take
Yes.
when it comes to that exact mindset of their consumer. I think there's a right place for them to hit where it's maybe humor, maybe it's, for some brands, it's sarcasm, whatever it is that like helps it land. But I think authenticity, although an overused word, like I think truly like the way authenticity hits the gut a little bit sometimes, really checking and saying, like, are we working with this person because we really love them and what they add to our product? Or did we Google search, most popular rapper for kids today, and like sent a contract out to the top 3?
Yep.
I think you just got to have a reason for being there and lead from there. It sounds so corny, but it makes all the difference in how it's received and how the partnership itself looks to, people like us that just don't work in the building.
Yep, and that's the toughest thing to actually see, for people to see, because they're so close to it. Authenticity is it. And his way over too overused, but like nobody, the reason it's overused because nobody actually is using it correctly. Like it's like authenticity, but it doesn't need to be slick. It's like, but it does need to have hit realness, right? Like that thing of what it is, doing something that's a truth. Right? Where it's like, oh, well, I can't believe they just said that thing. That's exactly what it is. And it's like a good joke, it's the pee in the shower joke. It's like, oh God, I thought only I knew that insider information, right? And those are those things that are so human that you're like, whenever you can grab 100%. One and it resonates. I love it. Here's the thing. You're going to have to promise me before you leave that I want to talk to you more, and I don't know what form it'll take. It might be another episode, but I want to talk to you more about the formal, like what's trend? What is your methodology, no matter how messy, what's that methodology of like from a term, how do you find it and curate them to then how do you write about them and name them? And there's a world of trends that I just went through like 100 decks, but I'd love to learn more about and kind of have an excuse to talk to you again for that.
I'm super down. I would love to do that. I feel like I'm having real-time processing being here, even talking to you about some of this stuff. So thank you so much. I feel so honored to be here. You've had such wonderful guests.
I am so psyched. It's like right in the wheelhouse. And not only that, but it was such a great excuse to be able to catch up with you again. And I'm so happy that you are at Complex. I'm sorry that you had to move to LA and Hollywood during a pandemic, but character is not something you lack, and it makes for great stories, I'm sure, for you as you get kind of used to. So I wish you speed of getting used to things out in Hollywood when there's actually people around.
Thank you.
I can't wait to kind of keep up and see what you're having next. So like keep us in the loop of all that stuff. And where can people find you online if they wanted to do that?
Oh man, If you are looking for me professionally, you can go to meagandexter.com. If you are looking for me and you are not my mom, you can go to my Twitter @MegDex. So that is a great place to get inside my brain.
Great. I thank you so much for your time. Have an awesome day and awesome rest of the week. And thanks for joining us here at the Pop Marketing Podcast.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Joe. We will now be doing this much more regularly.
Yeah. I'll just record all our conversations. This will be great. This will be awesome. It'll be
Awesome.
2 birds, 1 stone.